Malcolm, let's now come on to brokering, because you've had a number of careers in teas. You say you started with Twinings, then you were in the brokers, and then a lot more after that. So give us a flavour of what you...
Well, I was quite fortunate because I'd worked at Twinings, and my boss was a chap by the name of Bill Worsby that said, I think you need to develop a wee bit more, Malcolm. Get a job in brokering. And I quite laughed at that, because as far as I was concerned, the brokers it was almost like a two-tier system. I mean, the people at Twinings were real experts in tea, but they actually hadn't visited the producing countries.
Right. Didn't really know.
Whereas the vast majority of brokers, I mean, they were sons of planters and so on and so forth. So it was, becoming a broker or getting into brokering was, oh dear. And I remember saying to him, what sort of salary should I ask for? And he said, ask for 1,000 a year. Well, that was telephone numbers after what
that was brave in those days.
It was. And
I started on £250, I remember.
And I remember going along and being interviewed by Robert William Carter, or Tiny Carter.
Yes, Tiny.
A real character.
Nice bow tie always.
Bow tie, half glasses, rather a large bulbous red nose. And I sat down in front of him, and he sort of started to ask me various questions. I'd then been with Twinings and Troop Mennell for 2.5 years. And at the end of it, he said, well, I like the cut of your jib, as it were. And we could offer you £900 a year and 3 shillings a day luncheon vouchers.
Right, they were worth having as well.
And I think, being slightly bit of a tart, I said, I'll take it.
Don't blame you.
I didn't
so
have
close to what you were hoping
I
for.
didn't have the courage to say, well, actually, can you give me another 100 and make it 1,000? So I started with George White's as what was then known as saleroom manager. And Tiny Carter was my immediate boss. He was chairman. And we had some lovely, lovely guys there. But I'll start with Tiny. The batch would be made up. You'd go and knock on his door. He would come out. And he would always, with his spoon, and he'd say, what's the first tea, Malcolm, as he came out? And I'd say, oh, it's Grassmore, Peckerfannins. And he would say, the dry leaf is evenly sorted, contains only a trace of fibre. Liquors present good colour and strength with little briskness. Cup quality equal to the last seen. He hadn't even got to the tea. You'd then remove the bait, he'd taste it and say, I told you.
Lovely. Yes, that's the sort of man he was.
He was lovely, really, really lovely. And then we had John Guy Owen, who was
he was a total gentleman, wasn't he?
An absolute gent. Yeah. He really, really was. And he was very salon, or as it was then, very salon orientated. Yeah. And he would come into the office and he would just give a slight bow. Good morning, my dear fellow. Educated at, I think it was Marlborough, went up to Oxford, got 2 blues, was a captain in the Royal Marines during the Second World War, had a bit of a rough time apparently. But he was a lovely, lovely man. And the little anecdote I must just tell you, I got married and I went away on my honeymoon. I came back, and to go away I bought a light 2-piece suit. And I turned up immediately after my honeymoon on the Monday, went to the auction, which was then at Sir John Lyon House. Yeah. Previous to that, it had been Plantation House. And he came up to me, bowed as he normally did. Good morning, my dear fellow. How are you? Fine. Many congratulations. Shook me by the hand. And he said, I have to say, you do resemble a used car salesman. which was his way of saying,
dressed as a broker.
Don't dress like that again. Yes, because that was the other thing. All the brokers would wear 3-piece pinstripe or navy blue,
collars,
stiff collars.
I started.
Yes, bowler hats. Even bowlers were in my time. So we had these lovely bosses, as it were. And then Tiny was about to retire, and taking over for him was David Panter.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And David, I remember David coming in.
Still going strong today.
With his shock of blonde hair, big man. And he and I had a fallout almost on the first day, sort of. But Tiny just said, tell him to, But they were good days in broking because we saw teas, Mozambiques, Malawis,
well, the whole gamut.
Vietnamese. I mean, we saw Vietnamese teas every single week during the battles that were going on in Vietnam. Ply Q, Kateka.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, you know, whether they tasted the napalm or not, I'm not quite sure. But so we also had Tom Muir was another one.
Yes, well, Tom was a lovely man again, but he went out of tea, sadly.
He did.
He went to Lloyd's.
Yes, he did.
And then he ended up secretary of the Caravan Club, I believe. He had a
yes, that's right. I'd forgotten all about. But he was I mean, there was
he was his grandfather.
Yes, there was. I think it was A.B. Ewell.
Yeah.
Another H.B. Ewell.
Yes, right.
And then T.B. Ewell.
Young Tom.
B being Buchanan, so it was Thomas Buchanan.
From the family.
And he was a Noel Napier Ford.
Yes, well, another second generation. His old man was the one that pushed leg cut manufacture.
That's right. So they all had experience of being, I'll say, out east.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
Whereas the blending fraternity, generally speaking, didn't have that. So from broking, I was offered, and we won't go into this in great depth, but I was offered. I'd worked for 14 years as a broker. Oh, I must just mention one or two others. The market men.
Oh, yes.
That we had. I mean, you had some great ones. We had Tommy Thompson, who was amazing.
Another gent, really. He was.
He certainly was.
I mean, he was he was a stripe above most market men.
He was a super guy. And then we had Toddy and Len Todd. And I remember John Guy Owen saying to me on one occasion, have you ever read about Toddy? I said no. So he said, well, he won a bravery award during the Second World War. He was a tank commander, and apparently he knocked out sort of 4 German tanks or something, and very brave man. But they never discussed any.
No,
not at all.
So many. I mean, look what we had in our, old Eric Loudon Chandler, our senior partner, who virtually retiring as I left, but he used to come in the office every day, read the Times, go and have lunch with old Geoff Rainey of Alexander Laurie, whoever, over the Sackville Club. But I mean, he fought in the First World War, lost an arm in the Second War, we played in the second row for Scotland rugby. And 2 of the people who worked for us, one of the tea inspectors, old Bill Irvin, was his Batman. And when he came back, he said, "What are you going to do, Irvin?" He said, "Well, come and join us." And so he became one of the tea inspectors. And then we had a lovely guy called Bob Simpson, who was a major in the war, and he'd had quite a good war record as well.
Yeah.
But again, you never heard anything about it. The people didn't. The people that did those brave things never did talk about it.
No, not at all. And then, of course, with George White's, we were then amalgamated with Gal Wilson and Stanton.
That's right.
So we had. Ronnie Townsend then came in.
He was one of my favourite men in a way. He was he was larger than life.
He was, but he scared the pants off me, which is ridiculous because he was such a nice guy.
That's right. Now, I remember all those years that one used to sit, quite a long time, up in the back of the auction room taking prices.
Yeah.
And, as the various brokers came in, the party would assemble and the partners would. And I always remember this, the Indian ones particularly they didn't even notice you were there. They ignored you. And then you remember there were people who picked you out and said, "Oh, can I introduce myself? What you just joined the tea trade, da-da-da." And the ones who always stick in my mind is Ronnie Townsend, particularly, Francis Cumberledge. I'm trying to think. John Guyon, fun enough. He, as you said, lovely man. And they came up and they spoke to you, and it was lovely. But a lot of the old Indian, Raj, was walked around a few of us
rather sniffy,
and it was very interesting. What a difference that was between India and the other.
Absolutely,
mainly Sri Lanka. The Ceylon guys were totally different.
Yeah, they were, and of course the other one that I mean, one of the nicest men I've ever encountered, apart from Guy Owen, was Richard Picton Warlow.
Pickled Walnuts, as he was known.
I mean,
his father, of course, was a senior director of all the salon companies.
Yeah.
And a bit of a tartar, I think.
He certainly was. Richard was a lovely,
a great guy.
He was so nice, and used to make me laugh, and we had a great relationship, he and I. We really did. It was lovely. So broking was super, but the market men in those days, I mean, I think it was John Donald or Graham Donald.
Yes.
Graham Donald.
Oh, he was very superior, wasn't he?
Always with a buttonhole.
That's right. Yes.
And with a rolled umbrella, despite the weather, and actually he had sort of whiskers on his cheeks.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there were real characters. They really were.
Was old Lammy around when you, or had he gone by then?
No, he'd gone.
Because when we had Gordon Richardson in, he was telling us all about Lamb. It was fascinating. He really was almost a Tartar, if you like.
Well,
he ruled the roost.
Well, you couldn't get away with it nowadays, could you?
You couldn't.
But I remember the very first time I went into the box as a market man.
Yeah.
So we had, I don't know who was the auctioneer at the time, but I had Tommy Thompson on one side and I was on the other. And I was given an order by, what was his name? Oh dear. He's it's embarrassed, isn't it, Mike? I can't remember. He was with Snellings.
Oh, Snelling
Lawson.
Old Man Lawson.
Oh,
yes.
but yes, and
Nigel Lawson's dad.
Yes, that's how he was referred
He's
to,
a
as
lovely
Old Man Lawson.
Well, Mr. Lawson, Black Homburger,
Always.
very polite.
Absolutely,
Lovely man.
And he said, my boy, he said, and he gave me this order, and okay, sir. And I'd spent time in the box just taking prices, etc., getting a feel of things over a few weeks, and it was coming up, and I could feel my tummy going over. And before I knew where it was all over,
yes.
and and Tommy just bought it. And I remember going to Old Man Lawson saying, "Oh, we got you 20 chests of Samawati or whatever it was." He said, "Thank you very much indeed." He said, "Don't worry." He said, "You're doing all right." He said, "Come and see me next week and I'll give you another order." He was, again, a lovely, lovely man. But he would give the impression that he was nodding off in the auction room.
I know.
He would sit on, if this were the box, he would sit on the right-hand side and he would have his eyes down, but he didn't miss a thing.
No.
He didn't miss a thing. But as you say, Nigel Lawson's...
Well, yes, he actually came to Wilson Smith, to Dorman Bradshaw, I think it was, and said, "Look, I've got son Nigel, and I'd love him to come into the tea trade and take over from me." That was the idea. Any chance you could give him some training, and he joined Wilson Smith for a short period of time.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, and I don't know, literally a matter of months, and then decided it wasn't for him.
Yeah,
and then of course went out and did what he did, which we all know.
Yes.
And you could see why he was a fish out of water.
Yeah.
But this is the point: you either take to it or you don't.
Yeah.
And he didn't.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's amazing the amount of people that sort of went through the tea trade.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I just, and there was something about the tea trade, very, very close. As you say, the Indian side of things tended to be a little on the snooty side.
They were, the old nabobs, weren't they? I'm afraid.
Absolutely.
Guy Routledge was a classic one.
Yeah.
Brian McCraith before him, and then of course Williamson's.
Again,
Richard Magor.
Well, you mentioned the fact that they would come.
Notice you were around.
Richard Magor would come into the office and do a tasting on a Friday, before the auction on the Monday. And I got on quite well with him. He was always very nice to me, but I think a good businessman. A tough cookie, but always very, very polite.
Yeah.
He's
extremely polite. Yes, but always felt that there was definite ranking with him, wasn't there?
Well, you almost felt as if the partners were concerned, because I mean, if it pulled the plug on the Indian side of things,
yes, things would have been very tricky.
I mean, they had I think it was 53 Assam Gardens or something.
Massive.
Huge.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely huge. At that time,
Yeah, so fascinating times.
Yeah.
Anyway, Malcolm, so after broking, you were just going to say, you then go where? Come on.
Well, I was, well, I'm not going to say where, but I was,
no.
There was one customer.
Another line of country.
Another life. I went down to see this particular gentleman, and he kept knocking me back, saying, "I don't want to deal with you. I used to deal with, I worked for George White's years ago." And I persisted in going down, and one day he said, "Okay, lad," he said, and he gave me an order, and I bought some tea, then I bought more tea. And he was buying huge quantities of tea, huge quantities. And then on one occasion he said, "I need someone to do the blending for me. Would you be interested?" And I was very content. As I say, I'd spent 13 or 14 years at George White's. And he said, "What do you earn?" And I told him, and he virtually doubled it. And he doubled it and said, look, I'll get you a brand new car, etc. And I remember going home to my wife and saying, what do you think? She said, well, you know, you've got to. And we were just about to have our first child.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
my daughter now is 39, so it was 39 years ago.
Yeah.
And I took on the job, and it was an absolute disaster. I won't go into any great detail because it was not the best time of my life. No, and from there, I decided that I would leave. And I'd only been there a matter of 3 months. And he gave me the car as a parting gift, which was a brand new car.
That wasn't too bad, was it? Oh.
No, it was very, very nice indeed. And I think it was a way of saying, you don't say what went on in this particular office. Yeah. And I didn't know what I was going to do. So I ended up selling the car. And we then lived in a small market town called Saffron Walden. Mm-hmm. And there was a new little development of half a dozen shops. And I decided that I would start a tea and coffee specialist shop. Mm-hmm. And we used the money for the car for the deposit on the shop and to set up the shop. We then had sort of 150 different original teas and coffees, and it just developed from there. So we did that we ended up having 4 shops.
Boy, well done.
And we started to get involved with the wholesale side of things, supplying coffee shops and so on and so forth. Then we were fortunate enough to do our own label for Harvey Nichols, and we did some own label for Harrods, even Boots. Now, by this time, we didn't have the money or the facilities to purchase machines. These were packed on C45s and so on and so forth. And I contacted Williamson and Magor, who obviously I knew, went to see them, and they packed for us. Now, unfortunately, due to my personal circumstances, things didn't work out with my then ex-wife and myself. Yeah. And I was taken on by Williamson and Magor. And I worked for Williamson's for a considerable length of time. First as their marketing director, sales director, and then managing director, which was great. So my life was blending. So I did blending, broking, retail, and then manufacture. So I've been very fortunate. I've seen 4 different aspects.
You've seen the whole spectrum.
The whole gambit almost of
I mean, although I can say I only ever did broking, because I was with Wilson Smithett from the day I started till the day I retired in 2002. But of course, I saw the world for sure. And of course, in being a broker in the middle, this was a great thing. You were in the middle. You were looking after the producer. You were selling tea on his behalf and getting a very small commission for doing so. And of course, you knew all the buyers because they were in the auction buying all the tea. Yeah. And I always thought we were in a way. I mean, apart from the fact that auction, I think works very well. I think it's the best way of selling tea. We were the sanity in the middle, because the producers always thought that the buyers were a load of crooks and just trying to do them down and get tea as cheap as they could. And the buyers were the producers were a load of idiots anyway. So we were the same people in the middle that kept everybody apart, but kept it all nice and sweet. And I remember dear old Jimmy Hilditch at Tetley's, Lions, when somebody said, of course, you're just trying to buy tea as cheaply as you can, aren't you? He said, no, and that's not the object of the exercise. The object of the exercise is to make the other guy pay more. Yeah. He said, we're not trying to crash the market. The market's the market. But if we can get the other guys to pay more, it gives us a competitive edge. Absolutely. And I thought it was a very sane way of looking at it.
No, it was good. I mean, when I started, I think there were 90,000 packages a week, something
up to 90 at the time. Up to 90. 80, I would say 60 in a low week and up to 90,000 in the heart of the Indian season. And 3 days a week. Yeah, started at 10, finished at 5.
And the beauty was, you could, if you were short of something, you could go into the London market and pick it up. So, from a blending perspective, it was ideal. So you had your futures. Let's say futures. It wasn't done on a future, but you'd be buying teas from the Calcutta market or whatever.
You'd have a forward contract.
Yes, they would be coming over. And then, along a little bit short of Assam, so you went into the market and you bought 200 chests of a particular tea that you required. So it worked very, very well.
Yeah, it did. But of course, thinking why the auction ever started in the first place, I mean, there were 3 reasons really. 1, we were the biggest consumer of tea by far in those days. 2, a lot of the companies were British-owned companies anyway. And 3, that I always think the most important thing is that buyers, if they're buying Indian tea, from Calcutta, and as you say, it all comes break bulk and a lot of damage on the way. If you contracted for a tea and it was being shipped for you from Calcutta or Colombo or Jakarta or wherever, you really had no idea what condition it was going to arrive in. The great thing with buying in London auction, we'd done all the work.
Yeah.
We'd had it all sorted. We'd taken out the damaged ones, all of those, and so everyone had been sampled, so they knew exactly what they were getting, and that was why it was so successful, I think. So it was obvious that once things like containerization came along, the whole ball game changed, and we knew it, and it was just a question of time. And knowing that London wouldn't go on forever, but when we did go out, we wanted to bow out gracefully, which I think we did quite well in 1998.
I mean, that last auction was very poignant, wasn't it, for all concerned?
It was indeed, yeah.
You know, I remember it so well.
Yeah,
I think, was it Hellbody?
The Hellbody sold,
yes, that was the most expensive.
And there was this battle between Twinings and Taylors. It was so funny.
Yes,
John Leader bidding against what's his name?
Wild.
Jonathan Wild.
Jonathan Wild.
And Jonathan Wild was determined to get it, but my God, Twinings ran him right up, and Jonathan did get it. 24 quid a kilo or something.
Well, I think it was more than that.
More than that, 25 nearly. And I remember when we went outside, John Leader, having to sort of lick his wound, and said, well, we got a hell of a lot of publicity without having to spend a penny.
Good days.
Oh, they were. They were characters all the way around. But even when I was doing this thing yesterday, I mean, the world's moved on, but there's still some lovely people in the tea trade.
Oh, absolutely.
But of course, it's generational, because some of the people I was tasting with, one of the ladies, she'd been in the tea trade now 32 years, and she went back quite a way. But what I was going to say, and perhaps we can add that on to the end of the batch boy. The thing that staggered me, I hadn't been down to Greenford for since pre-lockdown. I used to go regularly, and then of course we did judging, and they hosted the judging, as they did yesterday for the first time for a while. But all the tea ladies, what we would call batch boys, but they have all Indian tea ladies there. They are a lovely bunch of ladies, they really are. They have all been there for over 30 years. The senior one's been there 49 years. So I reckon the three that were looking after us had 120 years between them.
Amazing.
And they were so slick. But we were telling stories about, she said, do you remember so-and-so? I said, of course I do. Do you remember Michael Adams? Yes, of course, you know.
Oh,
yes. And so it was a wonderful link to the past. And I thought, isn't it wonderful that despite all the changes in ownership, they've kept them on, these ladies. They love every minute of it. She said, oh, it's lovely. We meet so many lovely people. We love the job. We love dealing with tea. And I thought, well, there you go. That is quite something in this day and age to say that's happened.
Yeah, and just finishing on that, you mentioned ladies. Now, going back, there were no, I don't know whether we call them ladies or women nowadays.
That's the trouble. We don't know what to call them, do we?
There were no women in the tea trade.
No,
and when my very, very first visit to when we had the tea dinner at the Savoy, there was one woman there, and that was Dorothy Main, who was the secretary of Tea Brokers Association.
Yeah.
So 450 men and the one woman.
Yes.
And it is so nice to see women
last week
tasting
a third
and
of the people at Tea Trade dinner last, and the chairman was a German lady from OTG. She
and rightly so.
And she was brilliant, made a wonderful speech.
Rightly
and Katie
so.
Tubb had done it before her. She was only the second woman to chair the dinner.
She was good. And one thing I remember about her, I think she said something along the lines, there's 5,000 tea tasters worldwide, but there's 5 billion tea experts.
Yes. Yes. No,
she's so right.
No, she was. She was. Everybody's got their opinion about if they have tea, haven't they, about it? It's given both of us a fascinating life, hasn't it? The fact we're still involved in it all these years later.
Yes, and that's why I think both of us wanted to set up London Tea History Association.
With thanks to Dennis's help, we've got this wonderful tea collection now. And we can only go forward. And the number of people that have got things now, they want to contribute to it. Because they said, when we go, our kids won't want to, they've got no interest in any of it. And then there's somebody like Charles Richardson Bryant, Brook Bonds, single man. He said to me, Mike, what am I going to do with all my stuff? I said, well, we'll have it here.
Precisely.
So there's a lot going to be coming here over the next few
let's hope so.
months, which would be brilliant. No, I think that Dennis really had the foresight and the ability to create this, and it's a massive success. Yeah, it really is. Well, Malcolm, it's been great joy talking to you again.
It's been good fun. It's been good fun. Reminiscing.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, the boy.